And thank you guys so much for tuning in to Sports with the Real McCoy. Today I'm joined by WQAD editor Dale Huntley, who is a huge Cubs fan, also a huge Bears fan. During football season, we always are chatting it up during the week. But Dale is even more of a Cubs fan than I am. You see he's got his shirt on, his hat on. He's always watching the games when he has some downtime at work. So I wanted to bring Dale in today to talk about the Cubs and what he thinks they should do at the trade deadline. There's a lot of discussion right now with the Cubs being third in the NL Central, but still very much in the playoff race because the NL Central is kind of a weaker division this year, on whether or not the Cubs should be sellers at the trade deadline, continue to build for the future, get more younger prospects in the farm system, or whether or not maybe the Cubs should be buyers, try to bring in a few more starting pitchers, possibly try to bring in another home run bat. So I want to get into all of that today with Dale. And Dale, we're going to start with that. We'll get more into specifics, but do you think right now as a fan that you think the Cubs should be buyers or sellers?
Well, first of all, happy to be on the show. This is interesting. This is new for me. So do I think they should be buyers or sellers? The answer really is it's really, really hard to tell. I would like them to be buyers because that's more exciting as a fan to watch your team get new players and push for the playoffs. And the team themselves have come out and said we would like to buy at the trade deadline. The owners said just before the London series, they came out and said, "Hey, we want to buy. We want to be buyers right now. We're buyers," because they were winning a whole bunch of games. And then they've kind of gone on a little cold stretch here, and they're back to, well, we don't know. So things change really, really fast, and there's still, a few like a dozen or so games before the actual trade deadline shows up. So if they win, they go on another hot streak, they'd probably buy. If they go cold again, they probably sell. But there's a lot of different moving pieces right now with what they've got in the farm system and who's on the big league roster. That it's possible they could end up doing a little bit of both buying and selling.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I mean, I think it's interesting with us both being really big Bears fans. I think the Bears almost possibly give a blueprint the Cubs could follow. The Bears decided to, at the NFL trade deadline, to be mostly sellers. They did end up acquiring Chase Claypool, but the Bears decided to kind of strip it down, build around some of the pieces that they have, which the Cubs do have some pieces. The Cubs are not an untalented team. They have, guys like Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, who's a little bit older, 29, but still the guy's in his prime. Christopher Morel. There are some good pieces on this Cubs team. The question is, do the leaders of the Cubs, the Ricketts and the general manager, do they believe the Cubs can actually compete deep into the postseason, or are they content just having a 500 Cubs team that puts butts in the seats, and they know they're not really having a chance to win the World Series, but they're fine being basically average?
So I don't think they're fine being basically average. Obviously, the goal is to be good and win a World Series, but they're kind of coming out of a rebuild. A few years ago, they sold everybody off. They got a whole bunch of prospects, and they were, bad for a couple of years. And now this year, they're under 500, but they're a little bit more entertaining, and they look a little bit better than their record. And that's kind of the thing. Is like, so we're like the only team in the Central that's got a positive run differential. Does that mean we're actually the best and we've just had a tough schedule, we're underperforming our record, and by the end of the season we will be on top? Or is this the team that we are, and investing in it would not be wise for this season? That's kind of the thing. There's a lot of projecting to the future. Are we actually better? Should we bolster the team to try and get to that point? With the Bears, it was a thing of like, we've got to sell because we're not going to win. We're just not going to win. So they did it the right way. They stripped everything down, and now they're building back up. But the Cubs already did that. They're in the later stage of a rebuild. In baseball, it's not as immediate. You don't, go out and get 15 new rookies the next year, and they're going to play the next year. You get guys, and then you got to wait 2 or 3 years for those guys to be ready. So, yeah. Basically.
Well, what do you think is the biggest need for the Cubs right now? What's the biggest weakness that they have, in your opinion?
They're a little weak in a lot of different places and not necessarily super weak in any one position. They could use more bullpen help, but there's like 3 or 4 guys in there that are pretty solid. There's a handful of positions that are big question marks. First base is a huge question mark. We signed 2 guys in the offseason, Hosmer and Mancini. Hosmer was bad. We let him go because we got him basically for free. Mancini is a bit of a better hitter, but he's a terrible fielding first baseman. We were hoping Matt Mervis would come up from the minors and be really great. He had a breakout season in the minors last year, and he tore up the minors earlier in the this year, but he just couldn't bring that to the big league club. He just wasn't hitting. Right now, Jared Young is, I think, playing first base for us, and Cody Bellinger is playing a little first base for us. So it's been a rotating group there. Third base is another one. Patrick Wisdom hits a ton of home runs, but he also hits under 200 and strikes out a bunch. Nick Madrigal's actually been pretty good over at third. He's actually been a plus defender somehow at like 5-0, and a pretty decent hitter of late, but he's now on the IL from a hamstring injury. Christopher Morel has played a lot of third base in the past, but they wanted him to be an outfielder. Now he's just kind of playing all over the place. He's playing second base today because Dansby Swanson hurt his heel. And then center field is sort of a question mark, but not really, because this year, we signed Bellinger, hoping maybe he'll bounce back and we'll get some value out of that position, and he kind of has. But center field is basically, Pete Crow Armstrong, the team's best prospect, is kind of penciled in. He's probably going to be there next year.
Yeah, Bellinger has been really interesting to watch this year. Has had a lot of ebbs and flows in his hitting. He now is on a 12-game hitting streak right now. So it's like all of a sudden it's like Cody Bellinger is, he's not hitting for power like we were used to seeing when he was on the Dodgers, but he's hitting in the 280s right now on this hit streak, and that's a tremendous player.
Yeah.
And right now he's just on this 1 year, I think was a $10 million deal.
I think it was 17.
17, yeah. He's on this 1 year deal. Do they try to extend him? Do they feel like he can continue to produce at this 280 level, and they give him, some massive extension? It's kind of to be seen.
That's like the question right now is, so even like without thinking about the record, is personnel-wise, do we sell or do we buy? Because you've got these guys like Marcus Stroman and Cody Bellinger who are like quintessential, like perfect, these are great sell dudes. Because everybody's been saying, hey, extend Marcus Stroman. This is like his best year ever, and he's, 32, 33?
Yeah.
Extending a pitcher off of a really good season when you have a long body of work of him being pretty, good, but not this good, that's bad front office.
No, I agree with you on that. I mean, as you mentioned at the very beginning, as fans, of course we want them to be buyers. In the short term, we want them to be buyers because, like you said, it would make the team more exciting. Hopefully that leads them to win more games. Maybe they get into the playoffs. But, a good front office does not think emotionally. Because if you think emotionally, you start making bad decisions.
Go back to Ryan Poles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You do things for short-term benefit and not long-term benefit for the entire team.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. As much as Stroman is lighting it up this year and having a career year, his trade value will never be higher than it is right now.
Exactly.
And there is a team, the Rangers.
There's always a team that wants a good starting pitcher.
Exactly. There's so many teams that are going to compete for the World Series this year that will do anything to get a Marcus Stroman in the rotation. And like you said, the age is a huge thing. He's not a guy who's 26, 27, and you got 5-6 more good years out of him. This may be the peak year he has, and going out and extending him off of that one good year, you could put yourself in a big hole in the future.
My guess is the Cubs front office wishes this team was either a lot better right now or a lot worse, because being right where they are is making decisions really, really hard. Because if it was an obvious sell situation, they would love to flip Marcus Stroman for probably a pretty decent prospect. If it were an obvious buy situation, they'd be like, great, he'll stay on the team and we'll give it a shot in the playoffs. But right now it's like, what do we do? Do we just stand pat on this guy and hope that the team gets better and doing that was worth it? Or do we sell now and live with the what if? Same thing with Cody Bellinger. Some people have been saying extend him. The problem with that is, like I said, center field is going to be Pete Crow Armstrong's position. He's our top prospect. Well, you can play at first base. Okay, but Bellinger can play center field. Somebody is going to be willing to pay him center field money. So do you pay him center field money and then have him play first base?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see. So if you're not going to extend him, why keep him? Well, because he has a mutual offer at the end of the season. If the Cubs offer him something and he turns it down, Cubs get a comp pick. So there's benefit to keeping him and trading him. So I don't envy the Cubs front office at the minute.
Yeah, I feel like first base is like middle linebacker for the Bears, where they always kind of have a good one. Like the Cubs had Derek Lee for a while,
Mark
and
Grace,
then of course,
Derek Lee,
Rizzo,
Anthony Rizzo.
It's like we're so used to having a good one.
Yeah, it's weird to not have one.
Exactly,
right
and you're right. It's probably the most eye-opening hole on the team. What are your thoughts on David Ross?
Man, they change. I love Ross. Personally, I bet if we were friends, we would be good friends. But he seems like a really good dude. He seems like he really loves the Cubs. But he's, this is his first managing job, and he's only done it for a few years. I think he has some flaws. I think occasionally his lineup construction can be a little questionable, and I think his bullpen management can be really questionable at times. He seems to leave guys in too long or take them out too early. But, if the front office likes him and the team likes him, then, that's kind of the biggest point. But, yeah, so when the team wins, I'm a fan. But when the team loses, I'm just like, hey, what are you doing?
Right.
So he got some points the other day for the chewing out the umpires.
Yeah.
Did you see what he said after?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, you get some more points for that.
Right. Yeah, I think Ross almost like symbolizes the team. It's like there's goods and bad parts, and it's weird. I want to ask you, and I'll give my opinion first, but coming into the season, honestly, the Cubs are exactly what I expected them to be.
Yeah.
They are a 500 baseball team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, my dad is a huge Cubs fan as well. And that when I was talking to him about the season, I was like, I loved the Dansby Swanson move before the year. I thought
I did too.
He's someone I really wanted them to get in free agency. I thought that was a tremendous get for them. Even though he's 29, he's still got a lot of good baseball left. And
well, they got him on a good deal, and statistically, he's been the best of that group that signed.
No, I completely agree. And I think
good move.
I think with there being no shift, having a really strong middle infield is important, and
Mm-hmm.
he's an incredible shortstop. So I think that move is great. I do think they made good moves, but the issues that we've talked about have been issues. We kind of expected these to be issues since the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the Cubs are right now sitting at 40 and 45 and third in the Central is about exactly where I expected them to be.
Yeah, my dad made a pretty good point. He's been watching the Cubs for twice as long as I've been born, so that's not true. But he pointed out that the last thing you build when you want to build a championship is the bullpen. So the fact that the Cubs have been kind of bad in 1-1 games, or they've let some leads go late, probably because the bullpen is not fully constructed yet, because you're not going to shell out money to those guys until they're kind of the last piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as when you talking about the trade deadline again, you're also got to be looking towards free agency. What do we want to free up for free agency? And this is maybe the biggest MLB free agency in decades coming up, because Shohei Otani is going to be available. So, and I'm one of those guys that thinks if the Cubs want to be that team, they've got to be in on them.
Mm-hmm.
And the last of Jason Hayward's salary is coming off the books this offseason. The Cubs have they bought some good players and they've made some good moves, but they haven't, inflated their salary to the point where adding someone like Otani would, cripple them financially. So I think they're in a really good spot, and I think the goal, maybe unspoken in the front office, was, to look good but not necessarily win this year, as hey, Shohei, see, we're almost there, we're a few pieces away. If you want to come and be the best hitter and pitcher on this team, think what we can do. We got these rookies coming up. We spent money. We signed Dansby. We signed these two extensions, Hap and Nico.
Mm-hmm.
So we're setting ourselves up so that you can come and be that final piece.
Right.
Because we're going to have to compete against guys who are going to, the Dodgers and the Mets and the Padres and probably a few other teams who are going to want to, and the Yankees who are all going to want to.
Right. Yeah, I think Otani is, like you said, that's this biggest free agent in baseball in decades, as you mentioned. I think the thing with Otani is if he's able to sustain what he's doing, which has never been seen since Babe Ruth, you're getting 2 players for 1.
Exactly.
So the price, even if you pay him $500-600 million, it's really like getting 2 players for $300 million each, which is not unheard of in baseball. So Otani, I think he's 28, so he's still got 5-6 good years left.
Yeah.
The question is if the Cubs were sellers at the deadline and they got rid of Stroman and a few other pieces, could they have enough ammunition to lure Otani in, a good enough pitch to say, we actually do think we can win a World Series in a couple of years, and you could be a part of that? Or is Otani going to look at the Cubs roster and go, you guys are going to be just like the Angels. You're going to be a 500 baseball team that never really competes for anything. And I think Otani, it's going to be clear that he's going to want to go to a team that wins. And will the Cubs have enough firepower to convince him that they're a team he should sign with?
I think a lot of it's going to come sort of externally from the Cubs. The Cubs will be able to point to, hey, look at the rest of our division. The Cardinals are probably going to have to sell at the deadline, and they're going to probably have to start a rebuild. Cincinnati's on the come up, but they're a smaller market team. Generally, that means how good they are is going to depend on new blood that they come from internally, so they're not going to be consistently great. Brewers are a smaller market. They're usually good, but not great, and the Pirates suck. So I think part of the pitch would be, hey, we will, if you come to our team, we've got enough that you can be enough that we can win our division, because our division's not very strong. And the Cubs can point to, hey, beforehand we had these guys and we were winning all the time. So now we've got, the Cubs' new core is essentially established. It's Suzuki and Swanson and Happ and Nico. And then rotation-wise, Justin Steele's homegrown. He's a Cy Young candidate this year. Wesneski's been a little up and down, but he's still young. And we've got a couple guys in AAA right now that can contribute hugely to next season in Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown. So I would be pointing like, hey, we've got these young guys that are coming up that are ready to go. And the Cubs have they've got one of those farm systems that is not very top heavy. They've got the one top guy, and then there's a lot of good players, not great players, but that can be good for depth. So it's like, hey, we're going to have all this depth. That's kind of what the Padres' problem is right now. They've got all these good players, but no depth.
Right.
So if you get past the good ones, you can just slice right through the rest of them.
And I think that is the one worry with signing a guy like Otani, and as it is in any sport. In any sport, having 1 or 2 really good guys, it's fun to watch. It puts butts in the seats, and they give you some incredible moments. But does it allow you to build an entire roster that can win a championship? And also, you always run the risk, any team does, with having a guy on some ridiculously high contract that what if he gets hurt? Well, now all of your money is in one player. He's no longer playing, and now you're kind of screwed. So as much as I am not, this is not me saying the Cubs shouldn't get Otani. I think it'd be incredible. And I think if the contract made sense and the other moves they made around him made sense, I absolutely think they should go for it. But there is always concerns with getting the best guy, because does that allow you to get other guys?
Yeah, and that's pretty much the line that the Cubs ownership has been, selling for the past few years. And weirdly enough, the rest of baseball is sort of proving them correct. The Mets, have spent more money than anybody. I think they've like $324 million payroll, and they stink. And the Padres are below 500, and they spend a whole bunch of money, and they spend prospects to go get Juan Soto. So the idea that if you just spend a ton of money on good players, you'll win baseball games, not necessarily true. So, yeah, there is a sense that if you pay a lot of money for this one guy, would it be worth it? But somebody is going to pay Otani that money.
Absolutely.
And if he is great, then, who cares what the contract is if he's winning you games?
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point you just got to say we got to risk it. We gotta strike while the iron's hot. We got to put some money where our mouth is here, because we're not going to be able to just, the Cubs are too big of a market to play the, rebuild, prospect,
right,
get good, tear it all down game. We should be spending money to at least be decent in the years where we don't have a whole lot of prospects coming up.
Mm-hmm.
A while ago, to go back to football, I saw somebody pointed out, like, hey, everybody talks about the tear down and the rebuild, but a lot of these, teams that people point at as being like consistent contenders, their worst seasons are like 6, 7, 8 win seasons,
mm-hmm.
because they're smart enough to, it's like, okay, instead of tearing it all down, we'll spend a few years being okay and then be good.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to, suck. If you're willing to spend a certain amount of money, and you
right.
can spend a certain amount of money, you don't have to suck to then eventually be good.
Yeah. Well, Dale, those are all the questions I have. I think that was a tremendous conversation. I hope you guys at home enjoyed it. But as the season continues, I would love to have Dale on again. And, of course, this football season comes on. Would love to have Dale on again for that. As I said, he's just as big of a Bears fan as I am, which is definitely saying something. For you guys who have been watching, you know how big of a Bears fan I am. But Dale, him and I love talking ball during the work week. So, Dale, thank you so much for coming on, all your wonderful insight that you brought. And I hope to do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe we do a post trade deadline. See how it all shook out.
Yeah.
And discuss the moves.
I would love to.